Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Tavern Talks. It is I, DM James, as well as my wonderful co host, Corey. And then right below us, we have our wonderful guest, Joe, from Game Train USA. If you don't remember, we did a previous show about Game Train USA when Corey was there, and he had the giant 3D setup, and that was like episode like three,
Two or three, yeah,
two
yeah.
like super old. So we've been here about a year now playing. Please let me know if the audio is going through well. Looks like I've got a little bit of performance yelling at me, but it should be fine. By that. But yeah, so we're just going to do our normal. We're going to go through. We're going to talk a little bit to Joe about his experience in game mastering, his experience in D&D, his experience in tabletop in general, um, and then we're going to break it into some questions and answers. So please, if you have questions, I've thought about this for a long time, and really that's what this channel was supposed to be about. So if you don't have channel points, you don't have donos, you don't want to do any of that, don't worry about it. Just make sure that you put question all in capitals so we see it immediately in our channel, and we're going to answer those questions because that's what this is about. So, and if you are willing to support us, there are multiple ways you can do so. You can pop over to us on social media, share us out. Otherwise, toss us a donation either through our tip jar on the front page, or you can toss us some biddies, and that just helps us keep the lights on and the booze flowing for the tavern. So, Corey, can you talk for a minute? I haven't heard anything.
Yeah. I'll talk for a minute.
All right, cool.
Wait, hopefully Elf Alexander there can tell us that he can hear both of us. So tonight's agenda, we're going to talk big battles, and we're going to talk organized play. Big battles, both in however you want to look at that. Joe will give us some insights. We'll kind of chat a little bit. Um, Either big battle is in a lot of players around your table and how to manage the battle, or big battle is in how do you do a war scene where there's lots of people fighting, um, and without without making the mistake of I have 95 NPCs to run for this battle. Let me take an hour and a half to take my turn and then turn it back over to the players. That's definitely not the way to do it. So yeah, I'll just turn it over to Joe. Introduce yourself, and we will start talking about big battles first, and then switch over to organized play.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Joe. I'm on TikTok as DM underscore Joester. Run D&D currently at Game Train USA on weekends and lots of other games online through Discord and Foundry and such. Got my start DMing, especially in fifth edition for Adventures League. Found Adventures League one a few times, and I noticed they never had enough DMs. So I was like, I'll try it, and I got hooked, and I haven't turned back. So that's where most of my large games comes from, because anyone who's been at Adventures League and run Adventures League knows it's like 7 people a table, which is a bit larger than a normal table. So, um, and then I just moved on from Adventures League into my own personal games. So
I'm getting a little bit of buffering, it seems. It's weird because I'm not seeing anything on my end, and everything seems to be moving pretty smooth. Turn off some random thing to see if make sure that doesn't make problems for us.
All right, so I guess I'll throw out a question here. So,
Yeah, go for it,
what's
man.
if we're doing tips and tricks on big tables? Uh, Both, I guess we'll talk a little bit about combat, but also how do you, if you have a table 7, 8 people, what tips do you have to kind of keep things moving, keep people engaged, keep the turns going?
Woo wee!
yeah, for me, I think the biggest thing for me to learn was learning to recognize play styles for people. And because there are some people who like to sit at the game and they like to listen to the role play, they don't like to jump in. There's some people who they like the combat part, but they take a backseat in the role play, and then vice versa. So it's kind of like, getting a feel for what they like, but also giving them an opportunity, but not too much pressure at the same time. And then also just kind of, round robbing it, like is either combat's easier, you have an initiative, but kind of having your mind an initiative, like it will go around the table. Okay, what are you doing during this time? What are you doing during this time? And have kind of a timer set up. Okay, I've spent 15, 20 seconds. This guy, all right, well, let's pause that while that's happening. Move on to the next person. What are you doing? Even if it's just like I'm just standing back and watching, and then move on. Just but basically circle around the table. Keep things moving. Don't let one person get the spotlight over others all the time.
Yeah, yeah. Sharing the spotlight is a hard skill, especially if you have, well, I guess moving the spotlight around the table. You're not the one sharing it, but because you'll have those players that are very like they would take the spotlight for an hour and a half if you let them, but kind of pausing and moving on. And we'll get
Or they
back to
want to
that in a
go
second.
in between everyone else's turns.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so you have those, right? You have the people who either they're more experienced or they're used to being more involved in games, and it's very hard sometimes to push people away, but at the same time, it's very hard to keep an organized group like that when you've got 7, 8, 10 people, um, especially if you only have so many hours. Like I said, last time I played a game where I had 11 players, we played for 6 to 7 hours at a time. So that's a little different in my opinion compared to a normal game like I'm playing now, which is 3 to 4 hours max. And you put 8 players into that, you're not going to get a lot of screen time if you start cutting that down. Then you add combat in on top of that, it's just going to be brutal.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's another part of it is I think it kind of limits um, your adventure, right? Like if you're going to play with 11 people, 7 to 11 players, there's less that you're going to be able to accomplish. And so you have to pick the right adventure or write the adventure with that in mind. To kind of keep it simpler as far as that aspect goes. Otherwise, it can go way off the rails very quickly with 11 players.
Hey, welcome, Heroes of Evermore. Good to see you guys. So we're talking tonight about, if you just chiming in, we're talking about big battles, both in the sense of tons of players, as well as in like wars and heavy, intense, moving parts everywhere battles. And then towards the end of the night, we're also going to talk about organized gameplay because we have some ideas, and I want to hear other people's ideas of how we want to do this. So,
So let's shift gears a little bit. Let's say you have a big battle, a castle siege. We'll just throw that out there, right? There's
yeah,
a bunch of people in the castle, a bunch of people outside of the castle, and your party. How do you how do you do that? How do you make it so that the party feels like they actually have an impact on the battle, but you're not over rolling dice um, to make it happen, right? You've got a bunch of NPCs to manage, but how do you manage that huge battle scene, but still give them something to do with the battle? Thoughts, ideas?
What I've not really done a lot of like huge like castle siege type, city siege type things. Somewhat chaos where there's multiple factions involved fighting each other. Um, for me, I keep it cinematic, right? I know what's going to happen, and I try to do my best to give the players an idea of like, okay, there's chaos. You get to pick and choose where you go and what you interact with, but you can also bypass some of it and let them, because they've got a purpose, they've got an objective in here. So it's to keep in mind the chaos is the background, and you still have your objective. So the more you engage with, the longer to take and the less resources you'll have at the end. So, um, and kind of keep those things cinematic when they go into a room, having people crashing through the windows and fighting each other, or something like that. Or sometimes, that's how you introduce a combat scene for them, as they're going through an area and another battle spills into their group, and then now you roll them into initiative stuff. But the other outside things are cinematic, but have them be able to be like, okay, yeah, the player wants to cast fireball over there to turn the tide or something. Later, you kind of come back to that and be like, yeah, that group that you destroyed, the other group, is now joining forces with this one and overwhelming them, opened a way for you to go in or something.
Right.
Kind of call back, but mainly keep it cinematic. Don't keep it too technical. You don't have to be rolling dice for all those other combat things. Dice don't have to decide everything.
Right.
So that
Yeah.
that's how I would do it.
Okay. Yeah, no, I've been hearing the same situation. There've been a couple other options I've heard over the years. One is to, break it up into small battles and then let your party who wants to go, like, let's say the town is being sieged. There's three different areas where it's being attacked. That you guys split off and you grab people, and then you kind of break those down into um, smaller fights. And anybody who doesn't go with it, or as the players start to break off, you just give those other players, soldier number one, two, and three. Here, you guys are playing these guys at this combat, and then roll your other two or three soldiers as a small squad compared to having to completely NPC everything. You let your players kind of do the NPCing as well, which I thought was kind of a cool option. Uh, but yeah, cinematic is a lot bigger of it. The other thing that I've seen is like big rolls. So you start with you set numbers of how many people are here, how many people are here, and then you take a percentile, and this is how many died from this area. This is how many died from this area. Okay, when they get to certain percentages, this happens in the blow of the explosion, or this happens here in this location, or some place gets taken over. That kind of thing, where you're managing it, but you're not really managing the inner workings of it. It's more of a, hey, when the dice hit this number, the door is going to fall. If the dice never hits that number, well then heck, they did a really good job and they held themselves off. But yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I like that, and we've got some chat recommendations. I like that a timer, like give them a mission of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
You got to hold the wall for 5-6 rounds, and then your reinforcements get there.
Yeah.
That could be a good, and I think that it goes back to what Joe said. It's cinematic, right? You
Right.
give them a mission or something to do within the battle that makes sense to the battle as a whole. And if you want to have multiple encounters in that one battle, then give them multiple things to do. I also
Right.
like what you're talking about having some kind of mechanic going for the battle as a whole. Um, Especially if you haven't pre-written what the outcome is, right? If the
Right.
castle's being sieged and you're going to kind of leave it up to what happens that evening as you
Yeah.
play, as whether or not the enemies now sack the castle and you're on the run, or whether you were able to defend your homeland and
Right.
push them back. That's having some way to mechanically do that without running a bunch of combats.
Right.
Um,
The other thing
and
I've
I would say,
been suggested on something like that is then give your players the opportunity to enhance or decline that mentality. So if you say, hey, if you want to skip, you want to, not take your action because you're going to instead inspire the troops around you, well,
yeah,
then they get a double roll to see what number they get compared to, or the you can do it as like an intimidation of, or certain things you do within combat, like you drop the gate or something. Okay, so now they slowed down them being approaching again, that kind of thing. Uh, but yeah, no, those are really, I like this idea of, state how many rounds it would take before reinforcements comes up from back, especially if you're in a large city where you've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of
Yeah.
roads and streets, and you've got to get the militia from this side of the town to this side of the town, and
Yeah. You're in
heaven
King's
forbid that
Landing and
the
you're trying to,
other yeah, and heaven forbid that the other side of the town isn't being ransacked at the same time, so you can be like, oh, guess what? Yeah, your reinforcements aren't coming. Well, why? Because the south gate just fell too.
right.
And battles, the other thing to set that up is, battles don't just happen.
Yeah.
There's set up, most of the time, smaller ones, especially big castle sieges, big
Mm-hmm.
warfares. There's going to be things that the players have objectives to do before battle, and they can give options. So throwing in like, hey, if they complete these objectives, maybe they form an alliance with a certain group, and if they do, then that group provides reinforcements. If not,
Right.
they
Right.
don't. Things that they do they shore up defenses? Then stuff like that. So you're gonna have things before the battle happens that they get to choose. But they're gonna have limited time, so limited choices. What do you choose to do? Do you choose to shore up defenses, or do you choose to go out and get reinforcements?
Yeah, no, definitely. Um, yeah, those are really
And
good.
what do you know about your enemies coming in? Are they coming by sea? Are they coming by land? What's going to happen here? And some of that can be a adventure prequels, like that that there's this horde of orcs coming from over the mountains. Well, can we stop them in the mountains and harry them all the way in? Things like that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that getting them to set up, or maybe they learn from spy investigation checks. That there's the main army, but the orcs have also like a little surprise attack goblins coming in from the flank. So if you can, shut that down, then it takes out an advantage that they would have had or something.
And maybe the people who are sieging have an enemy within, and if you've been able to find out who that is or what faction that is, and route them before the battle happens,
Right.
that's
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah,
So
those are
lots
great
of lots
ideas.
of ideas about
Yeah, like I'm
having.
flowing. The ideas are flowing. Now I'm like, man, I can literally write an entire. You guys are gonna see next year. You're gonna see, big battle, misfits, big battles, and it's gonna literally just be a giant book of nothing. But how do you run a ridiculous, over the top
Now,
battle?
if you want to tie that into the discussion later with organized play, they do have multi-table organized play events that happen usually at cons and stuff like that. But you can
Yeah.
set them up in game stores where it's like, hey, you got 3 tables, and depending on what happens at table A, there's consequences or benefits to table B. Maybe it's a competition thing. They're all trying to get to the MacGuffin first. Maybe they're trying to work together, and they're doing things. And so the key to that is communication between the tables. You have a runner going back and forth passing
Yep.
information. So table A could be like, yeah, you see that like this other group has had a setback and stuff. So give them a chance to raise the gates and whatnot, and help them out.
Yes.
Conversely, this other group has already finished. They were in round 4,
Yeah.
and so they're going to come to the rescue, right?
Yeah. Yeah. They fly.
That could be,
They're the ones running down the street with 65 new troops to hold the wall back. Those are the fun.
yeah.
Um,
No, I would love to do, and the thing that you were saying, that we can go ahead and shift a little bit to the organized play,
yeah.
especially if you do it at a convention over multiple days. Like day 1 could be all the stuff like Joe was saying leading up to the battle, like
Yeah.
all of the going out to try and find reinforcements, and then day 2 it's another tier of heroes, right? You got your
Right.
low level heroes running out and doing the scouting and
Yeah.
trying to figure out and diplomacy and getting the diplomat to the right person and keeping somebody safe.
Yep.
And then day 2 another higher tier of heroes, kind of training people and getting the city ready and the first battles of the city, and then third day is like the big thing, right?
Yeah, the big
Um,
climax, and the fourth day the dragon lands in the middle of the city,
right. Yeah, the fourth day we just burn the whole city down and
Yeah, we walk
call
away for the night.
call it good.
Call it good. Yeah, the con's over. No, I've been kind of, my brain's been really racking on this idea of organized play, and there's a couple other groups that are out there in the world, and there's a really big one out there, and props to them because they've done it right. They have over 100 people in this thing, and I've not yet connected completely with them. But Realmsmith, if you've ever heard of them, they did an amazing job with the idea of connecting their stream to their Discord. And really, that's something we would love to do because not only is it going to connect our stream to the Discord, it's going to connect our stream to the world of Zathe, which is GUI Cube stuff, which is where most of our stuff is ran through. So we've really thought about this and we're trying to rack our brains on it. And we had a wonderful person from our group called Casey, who's been on our show before. And he was the original one that came up with the idea to have this organized chaos kind of being allowed to develop the world outside of the books, outside of the stories. And how better to do that than an online play? So we've been thinking about this and going through it, and now the conversation you've had about each of you has an objective to simply apply this major goal. My brain is now moving 150 miles an hour, going, okay, this is how we can pull these things off. These big events like this can happen both in the Discord and on the stream, and all together it would make this amazing story for this next setting that's being placed up. I have a character backstory. I'm gonna read this real quick because we got a couple.
No,
of
no,
questions.
I've read it. I can comment on it.
Sure.
So, yeah, I like this. It's basically you're giving a unit or a faction within the battle sort of a character sheet with some actions that the players can choose from, giving it an initiative and kind of having that faction be able to do some things, whether that's cover fire, cavalry charge, those types of things. So I really like that idea. I also, the one above that, treating units as big swarms and
Yeah.
rescaling the map from 5 to 30 feet. So that that can be another way to think about it. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it really depends too on things shift quickly when it becomes okay. Is the party just them in the battle, like or are they commanding the battle? Is each player leading their own troop of players and commanding them? Maybe the mage is like, okay, I'm in charge of the magical group, and we can all cast a mass fireball. Or, you give them each character sheet like that one suggested for their group, and based on things that they did during setup, maybe give them boost their stats or give them features or something. But if it's just the party as as a group together, going in, then you shift focus a little bit. Maybe that thing has actions on the side that either let one of your players run that, and be like, okay, now what is this group going to do? They can roll based on that sheet.
Yeah, that's a great.
yeah,
That's. Man, now I'm really thinking this through. This is exciting because this is kind of something that's been racking my brain.
so there's a hero game, a superhero game out there called Prowlers and Paragons, which is actually written by some local folks here in the Denver area.
It said
Okay,
prowlers.
it's Prowlers and Paragons, and it's actually okay. The people locally, I think, redid it. Um, so Evil Beagle Games kind of redid the old Prowlers and Paragons out, and I don't know if they were actually involved in the first version or not. But at any rate, what I'm trying to get at is they did it in a way where like there's a number of boxes that you in the boxes like check boxes, right? And doesn't matter how you try to let the players be creative, but they have to overcome whatever that challenge is. So let's say the challenge is defend the gate. That's the challenge. There's 5 boxes on it. What are you going to do as a party to try to defend the gate? And a success gives you thank you. The success gives you a checkbox on that, and different players can add different styles to it. So like Joe was saying, maybe there was a mage that throws a fireball, from the parapet down on the people trying to besiege the
Right.
gate. So instead of it being like rolling a bunch of dice to do a bunch of damage, you go, okay, that's one tick.
Right.
You've tried to and maybe you do have them roll damage, but you don't apply it to a bunch of things. You just go, well, if there's at least this much damage, it's one tick. If they do max damage, maybe it's two ticks on that tracker. And then you could have multiple trackers around the city that the party has to try and manage
Right.
in some way. So just to kind of throw out to them, and yeah,
Yeah,
I
no,
think that's a
definitely.
good way you could
The
do it.
tick idea is cool because it's like, hey, as we grow, or as we kind of build out these organized gameplay moments, hey, if we hit 7 ticks, then this will succeed in the storyline will be able to succeed in this way, and if we don't meet it, then the
Yep.
storyline is going to shift a different direction.
And then we go into my favorite thing to do during a battle, which is a cutscene.
Yeah, exactly.
So as we're talking about organized play, Joe, what are some of the things, since that's kind of where you got, that was kind of your bread and butter for a while. What would you change about your experiences in organized play? What did you like? What did you not like? What would you change about it?
Well, I mean, you're a little bit limited with that because part of the cons that I had, one of the cons I had was like, unfortunately, it does limit your creativity, homebrewing, and customizing a little bit because there's an agreement. You're not running your own table. Organized play is people can skip from your table to like they can play with me and then they come play with Corey, and they should have similar experience. If one DM is handing out magic items, massive amounts of gold, that's going to trickle into other games and kind of really affect those tables. So you're kind of limited on like, okay, you have to set boundaries. You have to say, okay, we're going to run it as written as much as possible, or you can't hand out anything that the book doesn't say is treasures that's not in the written adventure or in whatever um, that you're running. The other part is getting enough GMs. You know what I mean? It's you need um, you know the organized play. I've seen that's always been the bigger problems. You have way more players than GMs that you need, and so what that creates is full tables. It's harder to get a spot. You can't always play with the same group of people if you want to, because it's human nature. You find a group that you work with and you want to stick with that for the most part. So organized plays, it's a little harder to keep that going. So I think the biggest way to fix that is to incentivize GMing and training for GMs. If there's an incentive, either offer them like discounts. Like if you're running it from like if you're a publishing company and you're like, hey, I want to get my products out there in organized play, you're getting exposure for them and stuff. Give your GMs, offer them a little bit of training but give them discounts and give them maybe special content that if they GM so many games, then for this season or for this product, then hey, maybe they get an exclusive adventure that only they would have access to from doing that.
Right.
Other thing is training and practice DMing, because getting people confidence to get up there and do it, because that's the biggest part of it, is just confidence. Like it looks from the player side of the table, it looks like magic sometimes, and it looks like um, some DMs are really good at, they look like they got it all together and they know everything, and on the other side of the table they're just internal monologue going, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. What am I doing, what am I doing, like I totally forgot about this and I totally did that wrong. But on the outside they're like, okay, we're gonna do this now. And so, it's a matter of just training and letting people know, like, hey, it's normal to have that panic on the other side of the table. Just, it's all about just keep it going, keep it moving.
So I think that, because I've only played the Wizards of the Coast organized play, right? And I found it very limiting as far as, and maybe it's changed since then, but it was basically you had, you know, PHB plus one book, right? That's the only thing you could make your character around.
They have
Um,
taken that away.
okay,
They
that's
have
good.
taken that thing off. But
And, but I guess I just like the DM finding it a limiting, because yes, you need to be able to get up from this table, take your character that to that table, and sit down and play and not take off with the game. Not that I haven't seen that happen in those organized plays where somebody's min-maxed a character, they sit down at a tier 2 table, and nobody else really gets to play because their character's so awesome but still meets the requirements. um that, by the time it gets to the lower initiatives, the battle's over. um so yeah, I guess that's that. How do we overcome those limitations where we can, as game masters, be creative, add things in without breaking other game masters tables? And how, as players, do we give enough agency to the player to really be creative with their character and do things that won't break the game? I guess those are the two big challenges that, if we're gonna make the if we have ideas about the organized play of the
Mm-hmm.
future, what would those be? And how could we overcome those challenges?
I think
especially on a scale, sorry, especially on a scale, because like Adventures League with Wizards, I mean, that's worldwide almost pretty much. And, so keeping that, at that big of a scale is so hard. You're a
right.
little bit more regional control, or something like that. It's a lot easier to start small and then grow it slowly, or grow it as it grows, do things, but you
Yeah.
got to keep that. And sorry, what were you gonna say?
I think more so it's letting your GMs being able to flavor it the way they want to. Not you're giving them not really a rule book, but a guidebook, something that these are the monsters you can use. This is the amount of loot to be handed out this day, this month, this type of thing, and then you know they pick and choose what makes sense in their little adventure for that time. Like, hey, this is what because the way I'm going to look at it is very lazy DM, which I know Corey and I big fights. We deal with this all the time, but it's okay because this would take some more extra prep than normal because you're not managing this for one person. You're managing this for many people. Is the idea to give somebody a quick blurb that says, "Hey, this is the beginning of the night," and then you let your game master at that point, "Hey, these are the 6 monsters that could appear in this thing. This is the type of loot that could appear in this thing. These are some ideas you can utilize." Really, at that point, you kind of just can those over to the game master and say, if you need training at that point, it would have to come back to one of the leads. Otherwise, I would say, hey, run with it, and then we'll
Mhm.
take a feedback session afterwards.
And maybe a snapshot of what the next adventure in the series is, right?
Yeah,
So that
yeah. So like
they know where to
you've got
leave
the
it.
beginning blurb and the ending blurb. Okay, cool. The rest of that is on you, because that's going to do two things. One of the things it's going to do is it's going to challenge your game master, and two, it's going to allow your game master to have fun. Because I think one thing I don't like, and the third thing would say is it would allow your game master not to get trapped in the XP problem, which is the only big thing I have with Adventure League, and that is if you throw 12 people at a table and you cut the XP down, and those 12 people don't come back next table, and you got people with 800 XP here and 400 XP here and 300 XP here. Um, and the only reason I say that is because I had a bunch of friends that complained to me right before I started doing professional gaming, about Tomb of Annihilation. First off, probably from what I've heard, the words of horrible uh, Adventure League game to run. Love Tomb of Annihilation. Think it's an amazing adventure. Not really an Adventure League thing because the XP can be fluctuating so much within the hex squares and stuff like that, or the hex uh, the scroll, kind of like sandboxing a little bit
Hex
more.
scroll.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
hex crawl. That's what my brain wasn't working for a second there. I couldn't remember what I was trying to say there. But yeah, so those types of things to me, I think would be more of you give them a guideline, you give them a little bit of a blueprint, and you say, hey, you know the world, you know the way. If you're living in it, first off, is like I said, this isn't just going to go the world of Adventure League, or this isn't even just be organized play. If you watch the stream, you're going to know what the world's going like. If you've read these books, you're going to know this is the world that we live in. These are the area. This is the area we're talking about right now. So you're kind of more just fleshing out a small area of a group or a small adventure within the group. Um, and I don't know if it would be as exciting or not. I think it would be more so. It'd have to be up to the GM to make that those encounters feel like they're part of the story rather than just an encounter for the players to play on.
Yeah, when I started Adventures League, I mean, and it was like right when 5e came out. They had a couple like Adventures League modules that were like introductions, and then you just got into the book, right? So I did Horde of the Dragon Queen, I did Curse of Strahd, and in an adventure like a bigger adventure like that, organized play is not the place for those. When I left though, they actually have I thought that they weren't doing this straight up books anymore. Like if they had the Tomb of Annihilation book, they had several like 2 hour expeditions and 4 hour excursions, right? That were, the 4 hours were longer.
Mm-hmm.
um, and then those were like one-off like modules. It's in that world and it's going on around the same time as what's going on in that adventure, and it may feature some of the same npcs, but it's not exactly that book. It's like side quests and stuff like that that would maybe enhance
Okay.
that adventure. But so like one of the 2 hour ones is it's like one scenario. You have an NPC come and offer you a quest. Maybe another NPC says no. Hey, while you're doing that, steal this thing for me too, or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's like a one quest, one
Okay.
little arc type thing. You're not doing, and then you finish that. In those modules, I thought they were written pretty well of saying, okay, you figure out, and it's in the DMG and in the PHP, you have these tools for like figuring out your party's average party level and power level. So if you have 6 players, average party level 5, like this is like what CR monsters you should be using, or CR
Right.
parties. Like throw in 2 more goblins if you have, if
Mm-hmm.
it's average party levels 4, throw in 2 more goblins. So that way, you can keep it challenging.
Right.
If you have less players, lower level players, and you take away 2 goblins,
Right. Yeah. No, I,
things
I,
like
I
that.
agree. And like I said, I haven't seen Adventure League in probably 9 months or so, and I don't know if the company, or I don't know if uh, the game store was running it the newest Adventure League or not. So there's that too, because the other problem with Adventure League, from what I've noticed, is there's no training, even for the
No,
game
not
stores
really.
half the time.
The game store I did it at, we did have one guy who was kind of running it, and he did offer like, "Hey, come in on this Saturday, and I'll basically lectured us for for 2 or 3 hours. I mean, but gave us some really great ideas. Showed us, okay, here's what an adventure looks like. This is the tables you'll see. This is the kind of things you want to look for, and this is what it means. These are the important parts. These are the parts you can kind of gloss over, and went on to be like how to do challenges, group challenges, how to do a regular challenge, and kind of like gave us the top view and stuff. And it was useful, but if they could have that more organized at every store, and like actually have maybe like a video you can watch on their website or something, and then have like a weekly Discord group where people can come in and just
Yeah,
practice the situation, and stuff like that. That would, I think, help out a lot.
I think for game masters, it's very if Adventure League's doing it the way you were talking about, I think that's a little more unique compared to the way they were doing it, with just giving an adventure and saying, "Hey, this part of the adventure is what you're going to run. This part of the adventure is what you're going to run." Um, and I also think that kind of gives you what you were talking about, which is that little bit of a incentive, because now you're saying, "Hey, these are the 4 or 5 adventures that have been cut apart, or side adventures within this that you get now as a game master for running an Adventure League table at the store." Those are kind of cool ideas. I like that thought process, and it's kind of something we've talked about with the Misfits process. Is that if people want to play games with us and they want to do this organized world where they're bringing NPCs into the world, they're bringing in crafters into the world, they're bringing adventures into the world. How do we get it so that it's fun for the players, exciting for your game masters to come do it? What extra stuff do they get? And also, is it beneficial to the stream? And I think those are just the questions we're kind of trying to work through at the moment for the upcoming year. Um, so, real quick, I'm going to do my little pitch, because this is something we got to make sure that we're telling people is our main focus, our main drive right now is to get people to our Discord, because our community is growing. We're trying to get people organized with game masters and players. If you're a game master, there's quite a bit of us in there. If you're a player, we don't have players, but we have game masters willing to run games. So that's exciting. We have a looking for games channel in there that you can actually go into and type that, hey, I want to play a game in this time frame and this date. And then one of our game masters or one of the people in the Discord is going to contact you, hopefully, and then we're going to kind of keep building that group like that. Um, we do, however, we will offer, it's up to the game master, of course, if he's going to run a free game or a paid game. And that's up to you, and that's all going to be done outside of our Discord. So if you're running those types of things, please make sure that you're agreeing with those as a group, and that you're not doing it on the Discord itself. We are strictly going to just promote the fact to get people grouped together. Um, but yeah, so definitely come over, hang out with us on our Discord. I'm always in there, so if you really are looking for me, I seem to be uh, online probably more than most people. It's it might be an addiction. It might just be a passion. I haven't figured it out yet. In all honesty, if it starts paying the bills, it's going to move from an addiction to a passion, I guess, or at least a more lucrative passion or addiction. So yeah, we'd love to have you guys over there to hang out with us. Uh, I've got a ton of notes, like writing down stuff about how wars were ran, because I thought those are some really cool ideas. Um, the idea of, if you've got a big table, just making sure that you just keep the ball rolling and kind of have that initiative order in your head, to not give people too much time before you move to the next person. Um, and then this multi-table organized gameplay, like I've got literally a list of things. Like, okay, I got to go over this with the team and figure out how we can do this, because it's pretty awesome.
Now I
So
might
what
be
do you think?
throwing. Oh, go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say I might be throwing another monkey wrench in that list. There was one thing I was in another group we tried to get set up, but kind of petered out. But I still think it's a really cool idea. It's kind of a weird mesh between organized play and what they call like a West Marches campaign. So it will be one big shared world, and you can have adventures and stuff in there. But what one group does in their adventure permanently changes that world. So if they go and sack a castle, or they go and clear out a wizard's tower and take up residence there in that world for other players, yeah, there's that wizard's tower and it's occupied by another party
Right,
of
I love the
people
idea.
and
Truthfully, I
stuff
think
like
that's kind
that.
of how it would develop over, if we got enough people and enough interest. That's kind of the plan of, not only would it affect other people within the Discord, because the idea is that you guys are role playing in the Discord, you're having fun in the Discord, and that you're building those connections, factions, whatever you want to do in the Discord. But that we also want to make that so that if they're in areas that we've presented them, that maybe our players have seen, or our players are walking through in the time frame, that not only are they going to be shown up in the Discord, but you're also going to hear your name, or you're going to hear your shop, or the adventure that has happened might come up in a rumor on the stream itself. So we want to make sure that everything is linked together, which is really extremely difficult. And I'm probably gonna this
And
head of
so
mine is
so the
just gonna
question I
kind
was
of
going to ask is uh how many GMs minimum do you need to be able to pull something like this off? And knowing that the world doesn't have to be a globe, a
yeah.
multi-continent world to start. You could say we're using this one kingdom to start,
Hmm.
and we have whatever 5 GMs, and they're
Yeah.
going to run in this one kingdom. Um, what do you think is the minimum number? What do you think is the minimum number of players, and how often are people going to be interacting uh, with this world? Is it going to be a daily thing in Discord? Or are we going to have like weekly posts? I don't know. I'm just trying to wrap my head around it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a scaling thing, right? So the more players you have, I mean, because you need both. You can't say we're going to prioritize one over the other
Right.
necessarily.
Exactly.
You need both, because you can have 15 DMs, and if you have 20 players, it's you're gonna have DMs
Half of the
sitting around.
DMs are gonna be playing players.
Yeah,
They're
they're going
gonna
to
be
be
players.
playing. So
Um,
it's you basically want,
yeah.
and activity is another thing we find. I've been on other discords, and I find it's vastly different from one community to the next. Where
Yeah.
some communities, like, everybody's pretty active, and then there's some who's like, yeah, you get this core group who's really active, and then a bunch of, like, maybe they'll check in every other week or once a month, want to play and stuff like that. So it's really hard to just come up with a concrete, like, okay, you need 100 players and 15 DMs, and it's all about engagement with
Yeah,
active
exactly.
players
I
and
think I
stuff
agree with that one. Is I think it's going to be a scaling thing, and it's going to be a an ongoing process of fixing what we're seeing in feedback from the community. Curious guys, so if you're still in here and you've listened
Join
to
in
us
now.
on this, what is your guys' thoughts on this? Do you think you'd be interested in running this or helping us kind of get this thing off the ground?
And
Um,
maybe the one way to get it off the ground is to take our earlier conversation,
yeah,
get 3 to 5 GMs and a small group of players, and say we're going to run this one kind of historical event,
yep,
right? This one, clash of two armies or
right,
whatever,
yeah,
and there's going to be multiple factions in it, and that's what we're running. And it's more like a organized play at a convention where it's,
right,
20 players, different tables, and we start small, see how that works. And then, you know, uh, basically you write it as a almost like, we're only going to worry about this one adventure. We're not going to go outside the scope of this one
right.
adventure.
Yeah, so right now the party's getting ready to go into a town called Pendrugan. Pendrugan's a large town. It's got 3 to 4 different divisions or districts, that kind of thing. My thought process is if you don't want to be an adventurer and you just want to be a part of the world, you can be a citizen here. So if you're a citizen, you're just going to get a small character sheet right up that you say your name, what you are, maybe if you have any relatives, that kind of thing, and then which district you live in. And then, maybe that's something that instead of your role playing throughout the game, playing by a play by post, your your games are more so, hey, I'm gonna go help so and so with, you know, setting up their inn or this or whatever your specific job is, and then you get to pick. And of course, it would help, and then building some sort of way of commerce for something like that. But if you wanted to be an adventurer, then of course this would work really awesome with what Corey's saying of grabbing 3 or 4 different groups, saying, "Hey guys, this is the goal, and everybody's a part of the goal." So this group here is going to take care of making sure that the orcs don't come in the west gate. This guy is going to make sure that uh, the bats flying overhead. This one's doing, and they each have their own organizational goal. Um, and then in the end, one of two things will happen: either it'll be played out on stream where they'll talk about it, or they'll be in their own little issue of the adventure, and they'll say, okay, this is happening here, this is happening here, and they're going to keep talking about this, and then they're going to be doing their own objective online, but they're also going to your contributions of did you succeed in your objective or not is going to benefit or affect negatively the players on stream as well, which I think is kind of the cool process that I'm kind of starting to spin around in my head. But we really need to start building templates on, uh, yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
Kind of. You know,
Tower defense with it.
if we got that massive, and we would, we'd build the Discord big enough so that it would have structures. So if you were moving, you would just have to contact the GM to say, "Hey, I need to be moved to this RP channel so that I can, because this is where I'm moving my character to." That kind of thing. Um, if it got that big, that'd be amazing, and we'd come up with, but those would bring uh,
Challenges.
their own challenges. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
So
other
Yep.
thing that you could do too is, I know there's some DMs who are like, you know what, I don't really have bandwidth to play in an ongoing series or whatever,
yeah,
but they could be like, there's a subreddit for this, and I've had my friends do this for me in my games, and my players love it. Is basically uh, villain for hire, right? So
yeah,
offload your, how would your villain stuff to another DM or another player, and be like, okay, you're Strahd. Here's the resources that you have, and here's your goals and objectives. The party just did this. How do you respond?
right, exactly.
And then between sessions, you can say, okay, this session, this is what the party did. What do you want to do about that? And then the next session, that happens. Or they come in the session every once in a while, and they play an NPC. They play an NPC that joins the party, or they play the villain in the big bad fight, or the mini boss. You have someone come in and actually play that, and rather than having to like DM everything and run that guy, what is he going to do? I find, especially when it comes to casters, it's so hard because you gotta like learn. It's like learning a whole character, in spells and learn, like tactics and stuff like that. Offload that to, like maybe have people who are like, yeah, I'll come in and I'll play that, but that battle, I'll be that guy,
right.
for that fight.
Yeah, and I think those would be awesome options. I also think it'd be cool to allow the audience or the community to come on to those big things. If you're walking into uh, an inn of some sort, and this faction lead is sitting in the inn, instead of you playing the faction lead as the game master, you're like, hey, no, our community member, hey, what do you think? Would you be interested in hopping on stream for, because they have a question to ask you, or they have a quest that they think you might, or a task that this might interest your player. Because really, this is all just what we do this whole thing for is about the community, um, and the support that you guys give us. So this is, like I said, if this is something you guys are definitely interested in, definitely keep us, let us know, because it's something I want to do, but I am a one person show and I can't do that. So it has to be something that everybody else is interested in.
Yeah.
So
Um, so we're about 5 minutes from last call
yeah,
here at the tavern. Anything anything you want to kind of throw out there, Joe, as just in general organized play, uh, things that you wish, uh, even if it's sitting around the table, not like what we're talking about, but just what do you wish you saw more of in organized play?
Mm, that one's hard. I mean, because like I said, you have to have limits on how much you open it up. But I think like, was said earlier about um, opening up a bit and saying, okay, here's the requirements. You have to at least do these things, but you're open to do whatever. It's pretty good. Although I know that there's going to be a lot of new DMs who would really like to have. When I was a new DM, I loved pre-written modules because it was like, okay, I have to manage less. Like I not only do I have
Mhm.
to think about the table and players and then now I have to make something up. But you can say, okay, here's an idea written adventure, but if these are the things that have to be in there, everything else is optional for you. But if you want to, here's a suggestion. I think opening up for that kind of thing, um, maybe having allowable alternative rules, because that's one thing that like you play at my table, I have my own home, like I have my own
Right.
rules on certain things because that's what I think tabletop RPGs are. The rule books are guidelines and everything, um, but you can't just let it in an organized play. You can't just let it get too far out of control where you have
Right.
too much. But you can have okay these homebrew rules or these variant rules are approved or whatnot, and have it where DMs or whatever could suggest these rules and have them approved or not. Like basically instead of just being like, here's what it is, and then just no other communication coming the other way, have communication from those DMs saying, hey, can you
Mhm.
do let them open up for suggestions on rules or whatever. Let them submit, maybe those little adventures, stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think that if as we talked about before, if there's here's how you set it up, and here's the outcome, and maybe with that outcome, we say, you can't give away more than this much XP per player. You can't give, here's a list of things that you could award players as far as items, but everything in the middle. I mean, we could write things out for some people, right? To like you're saying, so that they have stuff written out. But I think that if we could get to a point where it's like, here's our tier one stuff. A tier one adventure can do these things and have these outcomes, not just in player or not just in character advancement, but also in the world at large, right? You can't sack Pendrugan in this tier one, that
Can't
because
Yeah.
that's going to
can't
come later.
assassinate the king.
Can't assassinate the king. We have limits around what the GM has sphere of influence around, right? You can do anything you want in the shanty tavern down by the docks. You can burn
Right.
it to the ground if you want, because that's not being used later. We've all agreed as a group of DMs we don't care what happens in that tavern,
Yeah.
but you can't, go into the castle and kill the king, and have those kind of guardrails. I think that would make it
Where it's been
that
burned
would.
down so many times, it's got a permanent mending spell on it that after like 8 hours, it just kind of like assembles back together. Not very well. That's why it's shanty. It just sort of hobbles
Yeah.
together just enough to operate.
You find out that it's like the equivalency of like Baba Yaga's hut, but just a
Yeah.
very poor spelled version of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't reform completely, but it does try to at least piece the pieces together,
Confuse some players. They burn down the tavern. They wake up the next day. It's there again. I was like,
You just
what?
walk into it's like you walking into a game store and they just have this beautiful inn set up in Dwarven Forge, and somebody just goes over and just goes, and you get kind of structures, but it moves and it teeters, and yeah, it's not the same, you know. But hey, guys, I'm glad that this is something y'all are interested in. Thank you guys for coming and hanging out with us. This has been racking on my brain for months now, trying to come up with this theory on it. Really, it started at the beginning of our show when we decided that we were trying to allow the audience to be interactive with the stream. But after months of playing in the stream and going, okay, this was a great thought and we loved it. Personally, I would have had to have an entirely different person running all of my tech, which one of
Yeah.
our players does it for the stream, and Corey and I run the text for any of our other shows. But we would need somebody outside of the entire organization to run just tech, because they would be the ones that would have to type up the polls and all that kind of thing to make sure that we were getting people to get that information out. I think this is going to be a better option to do it. It's going to let you guys feel like you're part of the world, which you will be, which is amazing, and it's going to give some new flavor to something that Corey and I know I've bought into. I don't know how much Joe has bought into the GUI philosophy, but GUI Cube was built on a collaborative understanding and in a collaborative writing